Oregon will not be getting Michigan safety transfer Keon Sabb. Is that a problem? Here we go.
You are Locked On Ducks, your daily podcast on the Oregon Ducks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, it is that time once again for Locked On Ducks. I'm your host, Spencer McLaughlin. Thank you so much for making this your first listen or your first view of the day. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, and your number one source to stay up to date with the Ducks. If you have not already, please like, comment, subscribe, rate, and review wherever you listen to or watch this show. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. New customers join today, and you'll get $150 in bonus bets if your first bet of $5 or more wins. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. So, Oregon was reportedly one of the teams after offering perhaps Michigan safety Keon Sabb, and he instead decides to go to Alabama. Is this a problem? Fundamentally, no. This was the sort of move that I was in support of, as I stated on yesterday's show, because anytime you can bring in somebody who raises the level of play at a position group, I don't care what returners you have, I don't care what high school recruits you've got there, Oregon every single year is putting all their chips into the middle of the table. This is what it's going to feel like. That was the case last year. Bo Nix came back. You had Bucky Irving back for his third season of college football. You had a bunch of other guys. It's an all-in sort of feel. It's make the most out of this season. There should never be a place for Oregon football mentally in which we look at the team as fans and say, okay, this should be a year where you just do some good thing. And then the next year is when you try to be really good or when you try to compete. When you recruit like Oregon and Dan Lanning are able to do, when you can add players in the portal the way that Lanning and his staff can, every year is make the most of it. So I was in support of adding Keon Sabb, who was immediately the top player available in the transfer portal. He's going down to our old friend Kalen DeBoer at Alabama in the SEC. So at least Oregon won't have to go against him, but there were a lot of schools after him for a reason. I think he would have come in and started for the Ducks, but I still like where Oregon's secondary is at. This was not a need. This is, I would like to have it. Like you need to eat dinner every night. You would like to also have sometimes, I don't know, molten chocolate lava cake, right? Do you need the lava cake? Or even if you just go to the lava cake itself, do you need vanilla ice cream on it? No, it's still great. Like molten chocolate lava cake is a wonderful, when done correctly, of course, it is a delectable dessert. One of my favorites for sure. It doesn't have to have vanilla ice cream on top of it. But if you put the vanilla ice cream there, it's better overall. But if you're just eating the cake, guess what? It's still better than almost every other dessert, assuming it's done properly, that you are going to find anywhere else. And that's what this situation is for Oregon, right? If you'd added Keon Sabb, yep, it would have been outrageously good. Talent level would have been even higher. You might have seen some transfers, but that would have been okay. Instead, Oregon's secondary appears to be standing pat. Now, there is still another transfer portal window. I don't think Oregon is going to add another defensive back at the cornerback position, but at the safety position, yeah, I could see it. The interest here for Keon Sabb was very real because really at the safety position, you've got Kobe Savage from Kansas State, Tysheem Johnson returning from last year, who transferred in last year from Ole Miss. Brandon Johnson isn't a safety per se. He's more of a nickel back. I don't know if they put him back over the top, but as far as safeties go, Sione Laulea could be somebody who goes from corner to safety. Brian Smith has talked about that here on the show before. But the safety room isn't as deep with experience. Now, there is talent back there. You got a trio of blue chip recruits that, depending on where the staff feels about them, or perhaps even more likely how they develop during spring football, they might be ready to play meaningful snaps come 2024, right? Guys like Tyler Turner, Cody DeCambra, you've got Aaron Flowers coming in. Flowers from the high school ranks has been getting tons of buzz this offseason, playing very, very well at, all at the Under Armour All-American game. That's a low-key tongue twister right there. and whatnot. He's risen up the recruiting rankings a little bit. So maybe one of those guys is ready. Do I know that? No, because that's something that we're certainly going to watch for in spring football and see how all of that sort of develops. But this is not bad news for Oregon. It's just like, oh, okay, they're not getting that guy. I would have liked to have gotten him, but do I feel like Oregon is in a really horrible spot on the back end of their defense without him? No, I definitely do not feel that way. So as this search was ongoing, this question came in from the Flock over at Subtext, which is how you become a Locked On Ducks insider. You get breaking news and immediate reactions delivered right to your phone. You can talk with me one-on-one, and you can get priority mailbag access. Or if you want to get in the mailbag the old-fashioned way, YouTube comments or X, formerly known as Twitter, at @McLaughlinCFB or at Locked On Ducks are the mentions. DMs are the handles rather. DMs and mentions are wide open. But this question came in on Monday as we were discussing and thinking about as Oregon fans whether or not Keon Sabb was going to come and join Oregon secondary. Hey Spencer, hope you're having a good day. Thank you. I was, and I am. While I know it's early and Keon Sabb may or may not commit to Oregon, obviously he did not. While I completely agree with your take that he'd take Tysheem Johnson's spot in the safety room and be an immediate upgrade, could Johnson be a guy that might transfer out even though Lanning likes to run 5 defensive backs? Even though there will be 5 DBs on the field at the same time, that backfield will be super crowded with guys like Muhammad, Florence, Cam Alexander, Brandon Johnson, Nico Reed, etc. That Tysheem Johnson may feel he's lost his playing time and may want to start elsewhere. Is that something Dan should be worried about given how thin the safety room is? I think the lack of depth in the safety room makes that a pretty transfer-proof position group for Oregon. I don't think if you'd brought in Sabb that it would have led to a departure in there. I think where you could see transfer departures, and yeah, I believe there could be multiple in the spring, are from the cornerback positions, because you just have a lot of guys there. I mean, think about everybody you just listed in the secondary. There are a couple safeties, but a lot of the guys that you listed, which is not everybody, are corners. And you've got Roderick Pleasant, who played a little bit last year. You've got Dalen Austin, who in limited action looked really good last year and was a highly touted recruit. I think the safeties are going to stay put. I'd be pretty surprised, even if Oregon brings in a transfer safety in the spring, I would be more than a little surprised if one of the safeties transferred out. Now, corners, that's a different story because that's just going to be hard to find playing time. I mean, even with the losses of Kyrie Jackson and Triquez Bridges to the transfer portal, Jackson went to the NFL, of course. Dante Manning is still there. Jalil Florence will be back from injury. He'll miss spring football, though. You bring in Jabbar Muhammad on one side. Cam Alexander was all conference. Brandon Johnson's there. Nico Reed. I mean, just a lot of guys. Just a lot of names. It's going to be really, really tough. That's going to be among the most competitive groups, and it needs to be because that has to be a strong unit for Oregon when you lose your number one corner in Kyrie Jackson. Now, Muhammad is a great guy to fill that spot, but certainly the secondary for Oregon I thought was really good last year. Definitely could have been better. What was not as good as it could have been, but was still very good. Just because you're a top 10% unit in college football doesn't mean you can't be a top 5% unit in college football. I could see guys maybe transferring out a la Keith Brown, where we're looking at the depth chart here in February and thinking, well, he'll be here, he'll be, able to get snaps. He might see a depth chart come out in spring practice and go, yeah, no, that's we're going to make another call there. So that's what I'd watch for. I'd be surprised if any of the safeties transfer out, but you never know. It's college football nowadays. You never know what can happen. Do you know what we still have to get to on the show? Many of things. That's what. First, though, we're getting to FanDuel because you can get buckets with your first bet on FanDuel. It's America's #1 sportsbook. And right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 if your bet wins. But guess what? It just has to be a $5 bet. It's that easy. Just pick the Blazers to lose. That's usually a pretty safe bet. Or the Pistons to lose. That's a pretty safe bet. Bet on all your favorite NBA players and teams with quick bets, live same-game parlays, exclusive props, and more. They've also got Oregon's win total, tied for the highest in all of college football at 10.5. That's a lot of respect. That's a lot of respect. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and shoot your shot whichever way you are feeling. FanDuel, official sportsbook partner of the NBA. Second segment sips, always a partner here on this very show. So, where can Oregon get better in 2024? Is it the offense? Yeah. I don't know that you can be much better than last year. Is it the defense? Yeah, the defense can improve. Pass defense can improve. I think the pass rush could be a little more consistent. Sack numbers were good. Pressure rates were hit and miss. Mostly it was just a Washington problem, of course, and I don't see a team like Washington in the Big Ten next year for the Ducks. But the defense, according to Bill Connolly's metrics, which is a way to generate college football efficiency numbers, the SP Plus is how it gets abbreviated here, but just know that it measures efficiency, quality, and all this sort of stuff. Oregon, according to the metric right here, right now, is number 3 overall, first in offense, number 1. Whew. That's a preseason analytics ranking of Oregon's offense, best in college football. Might have to talk about that more on tomorrow's show. 15th in defense. Yeah, I'll take that. Last season, the discussion was, can Oregon have a top 10 offense and a top 30 defense? Yeah, they did that. 15th in defense. I tell you, if they're pushing for a top 10 defense, boy, that'd be pretty darn good. Here's the area where, according to the analytical numbers, Oregon can improve the most. Projected 85th in special teams. Yikes. 85th. Yikes, yikes, yikes. Don't ever forget about the third side of the ball. Can change a game, as it did for Oregon against Colorado when Casey Rogers rumbled through the line on a fake punt deep in Oregon's own territory. So I saw that and thought, boy, I didn't expect Oregon special teams to be top 10 or even top 20, but 85th? Really? Atticus Sappington comes in from Oregon State, where he had a good year kicking the football. He was 13 of 14, and Oregon just needs someone who can hit a field goal late in the game because, well, that can be a hard thing to find. Ross James and Luke Dunn combined punting last year. There was a piece that was written not long ago that I kind of rebutted here on the show, talking about how Luke Dunn would be better than Ross James. I do not subscribe to that particular notion, and the data back me up there. So I think Oregon's punters are good. Their kickers should be good. So where can Oregon get that much better? Now, maybe the analytics don't love Atticus Sappington, or they don't think Ross James is prolific enough to down the ball consistently inside the 20. Maybe. Here's my theory, though. Do you have any idea how bad Oregon's return game was last year? It was not very good. In fact, it was well below average, and I think this is driving this particular metric. Even more than the punting, even more than the kickoffs, because Oregon's kickoff and punt coverage last year, I thought was very good. Correct me if I am wrong, comment section. You always do. I don't need to tell you, but, thought I might throw it out there anyway. Oregon did not allow a special teams touchdown last year. Am I right? Let's see. Texas Tech, no. Portland State, yeah, obviously not. Going through Colorado, that didn't happen. Hawaii, definitely not. Let's just keep rolling through. Yeah, no, that didn't happen. There was no kickoff return. There was no punt return for a touchdown that Oregon gave up last year. So their coverage has been fine. But I did some digging, as I often do here, to bring you the best show I possibly can, about the numbers on Oregon's return game. And I think this is where they're weak. So last year, Tez Johnson, I thought, did some nice things in the punt return game. Do you know how many returns he had that were over 20 yards? 1. He had 1. I love Tez Johnson. I think he's a solid punt returner, frankly. Punt returns are hard. Kick returns are the area where Oregon can arguably improve the most. Now, Oregon has been spoiled over the years with some outrageously good kick returners. Mikhail Wright is the most recent one. He had a couple kick returns for touchdowns. He was very, very good. Even better than him, arguably, Charles Nelson, and before that, DeAnthony Thomas, the two guys who rocked number 6. Those two guys can really, or could, I should say, really return kicks. Do you know how many kick returns Oregon had last year of over 25 yards. For those on podcasts, I'm holding up one way to put your hand into a 0. It was a goose egg. That's putting a lot of extra pressure on your offense when you can't set them up anywhere but inside your own 30. Because think about where you're fielding kicks from. So a lot of kickoffs are touchbacks, absolutely. But for the ones that aren't touchbacks, how many are fielded from the end zone? Typically, if you're inside the goal line, especially with these particular return averages, Oregon kick returners are just going to take a knee. They're just going to go down and say, you know what, 25-yard line. And it's probably the right move. But if you're fielding the ball inside the 5 and you have no chance of 25 yards or more, that is a significant deficit to your offense because it requires them to pick up basically a whole extra or 2 first downs per game if you're not able to give them plus field position. So this is the area for special teams coach Joe Lorig, I think, to work on the most, where Oregon can really improve. Because if you're expected to have a great offense, which Oregon is, with Dillon Gabriel at the helm, Jordan James at running back, Evan Stewart and Tez Johnson and Trayshawn Holden at receiver, and Gary Bryant Jr. and Jerion Dickey, Kyler Casper, those are probably your receivers right there. When you look at what they've got offensively, yeah, you're going to expect them to score points and be able to move the ball. But Dan Lanning has spoken many a times about hidden yardage, kick returns, punt returns, penalties, those plays that, give your team better field position or move you just a few yards here, a few yards there that aren't necessarily, what everyone thinks about when you consider moving the football or gaining an advantage or winning a football game. But I was pretty stunned to see that Oregon didn't have a single return over 25 yards. That means every time the ball was returned and Oregon caught it, like traditionally, and I would venture a guess. I can't confirm this because I didn't look at every single kickoff return that Oregon had last season, but almost every kick return is going to be fielded inside the 5-yard line. That means never, not a single time, did the special teams give the offense a chance to start just on the other side of their own 30. They were starting at the 20-something yard line every single time. And that is putting a lot of onus on the offense. And the offense was great last year, but I don't expect it to be quite as good. Like Connolly's got it, in this SP Plus metric at first nationally. Boy, that's some high praise. And I like Dillon Gabriel. I think he's going to do very well in this offense. He's not Bo Nix. I don't expect him to be Bo Nix. I don't think he's going to be Bo Nix. Oregon doesn't necessarily need him to be Bo Nix. And I think that Bo brought a lot of things to the table that allowed the offense to thrive despite that. But I was just perusing these numbers, and this really stood out to me as, wow. So not only did Oregon fail to create a return touchdown last year, but they weren't even doing well on the average. Now, I am encouraged because from year 1 to year 2, Joe Lorig completely revitalized the punting unit. It was dead last in the Pac-12 in 2022. It was vastly improved, and I think an actual plus for the team in 2023, and it aided the defense. So there was clearly time and effort and reps put in the offseason and practice leading up to last year that led to Oregon being better punting the football. That same effort needs to be applied. I mean, the return game, and this includes Tez Johnson in the punt return spot, I think the return game should be wide open on the depth chart. It might be the most wide open position group imaginable because those numbers are not good. Like, it's a crazy thing to think about. Oregon never had a kickoff return that gave them the ball on the other side of their own 35-yard line. I'm sure maybe 1 or 2 started, at the 5 or 7-yard line or something like that, but that's got to be better. And yeah, that falls on the return team to set up blocks, but really it's about the return guy. Oregon's got to find the right return guy. They don't have one right now. So that's a big area of growth for the Ducks come 2024 and something that could play out during spring practice. I mean, maybe there's a freshman who's good. Maybe there's a returner who pops. I don't know. But What we've seen in the last couple of years, not good in the kick return game. Oregon's got to be better. Oregon's just got to be better. You want to win a national championship? Hidden yards, that can play a factor. Has Oregon gotten better? Yeah, they have. Have they gotten better enough? Well, that depends on the question. Have you checked out LinkedIn yet? You should when you're hiring for your small business. You want to find quality candidates that are right for the role. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs has the tools to help find the right professionals for your team faster and for free. LinkedIn isn't just another job board. LinkedIn has a vast network of more than 1 billion professionals, which makes it the best place to hire. It gives you access to professionals you can't find anywhere else. LinkedIn does all that while making the process easy and intuitive. Hiring is easy when you have that many quality candidates. So easy, in fact, that 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours. That's pretty good. In fact, it's pretty darn great. LinkedIn knows that small businesses are wearing a bunch of different hats and don't have the time or resources to hire. That's why they're here to help. And 2.5 million small businesses use LinkedIn for hiring. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. That's linkedin.com/lockedoncollege to post your job for free. Terms and conditions do apply. We're right back into the mailbag here. Questions always welcome via the comments, X formerly known as Twitter, or the Flock community becoming an insider over at Subtext. Tony, hey Spencer, I'm going to try this again because I forgot how to read here for a hot second. Tony asks, hey Spencer, I like what you are doing, great job. Appreciate you big time, Tony, legend out there. Like to get your opinion. I rewatched the Pac-12 championship game. Oh boy, this was hard to watch. Yeah, man, I struggle watching any of that back. Kyrie Jackson, CB1 out, Birch out, both sides of the ball getting pushed around. That first quarter and a half was brutal. Yeah, it was tough. It was a tough watch. Washington, not really known as a run team, was 4 to 8 yards run gain, lots of sloppy tackling. Oregon's run game almost non-existent except for James and Tez Johnson. That catch by Holden was a monster. With all of that, with what Oregon has coming back and what they got in recruiting in the transfer portal going into the Big Ten Conference, in your opinion, how does Oregon clean up some of these issues? Thanks for the great content. Visual video breakdown would be great if you can get it on the show. Peace, Spencer. Well, logistically, that's a tough challenge to do a video breakdown because I'd have to hold a video and do, so I'll just explain. But so I felt that in that game, Oregon did not come out number one with a good game plan, and then they didn't execute the poor game plan, and that kind of set the tone and shifted everything in Washington's favor. And I think more than anything, Oregon's offense blew the game because they couldn't stay on the field. And so that put the defense on the field. The defense, right? Oregon wins the toss, they defer. I'm a huge fan of deferring. Huge fan. So they defer. I like that. Washington had to work really hard. They had a long drive. It took, I think, 6 minutes or so. They went all the way down the field, and they had to settle for a field goal. That was a great opening drive for the defense. Would have liked to seen him get off the field on third down a couple times for sure. But Washington, Ryan Grubb, the OC, who's now with my Seahawks, they're very good. But Oregon held to a field goal. That was big. But that takes a lot out of you. And so for the offense to come out, run 3 quick passing plays, not give the ball to Bucky Irving or call a straight run, they went RPO, pass, and guys weren't able to get open, and Bo Nix, threw the ball at the official. I don't think that play was really there anyway. That's where the game really pivoted in the early going. What was they did not allow the defense a chance to rest. Like a 6-minute methodical drive is almost more demoralizing. It's more physically draining than a couple of explosive plays, which Washington, of course, had later in the game. But I think the defense got put in a tough spot because they were on the field. Yeah, they didn't get off a couple times, but they held to a field goal, and then they had to go right back onto the field. That's tough. And I think that really set the tone, and that's why you saw Oregon, losing Jordan Birch, that certainly hurt. Having Kyrie Jackson go in and out of the game, that didn't help either. But the physicality that you're talking about, I didn't think was on the defense as much as it was on the offense. I didn't think Washington was pushing Oregon around on the initial drive as much as they did later in the game. Because as the game went on, Oregon's defense just wore down because they were on the field too much. And so I think that for Oregon's offense, they've got to be able to not go 3 and out on each of their first 2 drives. Like that's just asking way too much. Against an offense like Washington, it's too good. You got to play well on both sides of the ball, and they did not. And so I think the bad day for the offense contributed to the defensive struggles in that particular game. And that's why I'm not worried about it going into the Big Ten. Like everything about that Washington team was just a perfect storm to go against what was a really, really good Oregon team. That Oregon team was very good. But Washington's offensive line was given the award for the best in college football. And their offensive coordinator was so good, he got hired twice this offseason. And their head coach was so good that the biggest brand in all of college football, Alabama, the reigning dynasty in the sport, yeah, they decided to hire him. Now, they reached out to Dan Lanning first, but they landed on Kalen DeBoer for a reason. Guy's very good. And so sometimes when you're playing a great team, the chips don't fall your way. And they just didn't that day. They just didn't. And part of it was absolutely coaching. They got out-coached. And Lanning's a younger coach and less experienced, and Will Stein's not as experienced as the guys on the other sideline for Washington. They out-coached him. And the players outplayed him. Happens sometimes. Is Kyle Shanahan, never going to win a Super Bowl? No, I think he'll win eventually, but it's hard. It's hard, and you go through some lessons, and that was just a tough lesson for him. But going into the Big Ten, no, I'm not worried about Oregon's ability to be physical. I mean, you look at, the Utah game, for instance. Utah is as physical of a football team as there is in the entire country every single year. Oregon walked into Rice-Eccles and manhandled them. Bo Nix wasn't sacked. Oregon ran the ball decently well. They won the game 35-6. I mean, no, I have no qualms whatsoever. That day was just the perfect confluence of events, and Oregon got outplayed. Happens. But I've got a lot more examples of Oregon making me feel good about going into the Big Ten, which has got a lot of physical teams, than I do examples of Oregon not playing well or not playing up to the standard that we'll need them to come Big Ten conference time. So I think they will be absolutely just fine. All right, let's close with this. Question came in from Peyton. I love these questions, by the way, when you guys take an interest in just like me personally. I think that's cool because to me it means you appreciate the show, and I appreciate all of you very, very much. So this question from Peyton, and you can always ask me kind of personal stuff. Like, I'm a pretty open book. There are lines, but none that I think any of you would probably cross, so always ask away if you want. Peyton, so a while back I asked you what was your top 5 stadiums or arenas you've called games at. So I'm going to ask you this. What are some of the best games you've ever called? This took some thinking, and I've called hundreds of games dating back to my time in college and high school. So I probably missed a couple in here, but here's some ones that stood out. 2020 Student Radio Santa Clara at St. Mary's in Moraga hadn't beaten the Gales since 2014. It was a 7-game losing streak, I think. Or no, sorry. It was an 11-game losing streak. 11-game losing streak to the Gales. And they went up there and won in front of a packed house, and it was a tight game. You had back and forth. The lead changed hands 3 times in the final 90 seconds. Electric game to call. Absolutely electric. And I actually was recently asked this at a family holiday party in December by my uncle, and I didn't have an answer, but that's my number one. That's absolutely my number one. The rest of these are in no particular order. My first job at Eastern Oklahoma State College, men's basketball against Western Oklahoma State, March 2021. Jalen Johnson, I remember the game and the call very well. Hits a 3 with 2.1 seconds left to send the game into overtime, and then Eastern comes back to win. But anytime you get a shot to go to OT with less than 5 seconds to go, boy, it doesn't get a whole heck of a lot better than that. Also, while I was at Eastern, I was doing the Region 2 NJCAA baseball championship, which is a 3-team double elimination round robin. And Eastern was playing Delgado Community College from down in Louisiana. Game went 10 innings, was tied at 3, 0-2 pitch. I think there was 2 outs in the inning, might have just been 1. And Corbin Ford just unleashes on a ball. He's this little guy. He's like 5'7", 5'8", stout, but he just popped this thing into the night sky. And I loved my call on that one as well. But the game was just phenomenal. 10-inning thriller, and it was an elimination game. It was an elimination game. Seasons were on the line because they'd both already lost one game. The winner was going to play the following day, and Eastern ended up winning that game and losing the next day. But they kept their season alive with that particular win. And then a couple since I've arrived at Southern Utah, there have been a lot of great games across several sports. But the two that stand out, I was on the radio call for Southern Utah at Tarleton this past season. Trailed at the half 20-0. Came back, won the football game. 3rd and 4, trailing by, I think it was 3 points, 23-20. Tarleton has the ball in their own territory. They hand it off. Southern Utah, and if they get a first down, Tarleton wins the game. Southern Utah goes strip 6. They punch the ball out, scoop and score. Crazy. I mean, one of the craziest things I've ever seen. I think the final score is 27-23. And then a couple weeks, just like 11, when this show's airing 12 days ago, February 8th, Utah Tech men's basketball game for SUU, which is our rival down the road. Unfortunately, the men lost, but they trailed by 11 with 1:38 to go, ended up having a shot at the buzzer to win the game. Ball went, I swear to you, halfway down, came all the way back out. That was a great trip down memory lane. Love the questions. Keep them coming. Whatever you want to ask, within reason, of course. Appreciate everyone listening. I'll see you next time. Have a wonderful rest of your day, and go Ducks.